Good afternoon and welcome everybody to this invigorating session today. My name is Rishi Kapil. I'm an academician and an author, and my privilege today is to host an esteemed panel of speakers with us. And the topic that we are going to discuss today is rethinking talent acquisition to enable sustainable work. So, in the next 1 minute, allow me to give you a brief about the organization that is hosting the event and what does sustainable work mean. So GI, as you all know, is a global HR services organization, and their belief is that sustainable ecosystem of employment and skilling is really required to ensure that the society keeps on developing humanistically. And we have been trying a lot to distinguish between sustainable workplace and sustainable work, because what sustainable work means is that when you say learn something and you start your career, you need to continue the longevity of your work life. So how do you really upskill yourself, reskill yourself, unlearn and relearn to be able to increase the transformative nature of work so that it does not hinder you from staying longer in the workforce. So that is what sustainable work means, to enhance or elongate your stay into the workforce. And we are talking about talent acquisition as a process, as a department, as a division today, so that we are able to give due focus to the transformative journey which is happening in the talent acquisition ecosystem. And you know that acquiring talent is one of the first experiences which a candidate has with the organization, along with the experience in the workplace. So the candidate that goes through the experience of acquisition journey is taking center stage as much as the experience at the workplace. So when people talk about silent resignations and great resignations, that's one part of being able to ensure that workplace is sustained. But then the acquisition team has to innovate a lot in terms of empathy, in terms of technology, to be able to increase the livelihood and the life of work that people have in an organization. So the longevity of a career, it begins with the element of acquisition, and hence we have this dire need to discuss how talent acquisition is being thought through in today's world with technology and with in-person interventions for increasing the sustainable work practices in the organization. So as a session flow, I will take 2 minutes to introduce our esteemed panels, and from there we will be getting into immediate conversations on hearing their opinion and view about life at large from a talent acquisition perspective. So to begin with, let me introduce Ravish Saili to you. So Ravish is based out of Pune, and he heads the HR and the Global Delivery Center of a company, a reputed organization named Syngenta, spelled Syngenta. And he's currently associated as the head of HR Global Delivery Center. And he has a very, very diverse industry experience with very, very renowned brands. And he's got a well-rounded experience across all the facets of HR. So before that, he was actually with MasterCard, and quite a transition, Ravish. And there he was working on high-tech products and solutions in the space of payment and fintech, as the world knows it today. And he has also worked across a diverse portfolio of organizations, including RBS Bank, Reliance, Godrej, and Tata Motors. He has a track record of being a very, very versatile thinker and conceptualizes and develops implementing HR practices which are really aligned to business. So this is about integrating people management to business management. And he's been involved in a lot of HR transformations and being an excellent relationship builder. I'm sure we have a lot to learn from Ravish in terms of the topic of the day today. And moving on from there, let me take the pleasure of introducing Simin Askari to you. You might see her name coming up as, yeah, it is not Simin. Perfect. Thank you very much, Simin. So we had some errors earlier. And Simin is the Senior Vice President and Corporate HR Head and Business Forex Business Excellence at DS Group, and more than 2 decades of experience, 25 years to be precise on what I have with me, and have worked with organizations like Apollo International, Wave Rebel, Bennett and Coleman, to name a few. And she leads the strategy for workforce planning, again, something very relevant to sustainable work, including budgeting, succession planning, training and development for the diverse workforce. And the word diverse takes precedence over here because we are dealing with organizations with multi-generation people, and hence the implications and impact of sustainable workforce is also very, very different. And she's helped in creating and managing global HR practices and innovative approaches in development and performance management, and implementing very, very high impact employee welfare rewards and recognition scheme. So we are really, really excited to hear Simin out in terms of her opinions on sustainable workforce and how talent acquisition takes center stage in that. And let me take the privilege to introduce Jaya Malini Ramaratnam to you. And she's the Regional People Experience Director, South Asia at IDP Education. I think a lot of parents who are looking at taking their children to the next level education overseas would have IDP as the first name which would reckon to them. And I'm one of those parents per se. And she's right now leading the South Asia people experience ecosystem for IDP education. More than 20 years of experience spanning again across a very diverse industry: healthcare, IT, FMCD, consulting, and education industries. And in her previous stint, she has been leading organizations from human management perspective like CBRE, Asco Nobel, Novo Nordisk in various functions. And she also has that passion to design and implement sustainable people strategies and interventions, which are again aligned to business needs. So this is about human capital management, supporting the business initiatives, focusing both on short and long-term impact on people, structures, and systems. And she's also a Gallup certified strengths coach, and her specialties lie in change management, HR transformation, talent acquisition, management, succession planning, organizational structure design, and organization effectiveness. Overall, I think a very, very illustrious experience. And Jaya Malini, thank you very much for being with us. We are really, really looking forward to your conversations on the topic of interest. And allow me to introduce you to Maya Nair. And Maya Nair is the Executive Director of Elixir Consulting, which is a GI Group holding company. And so she represents the host as well. And she did her MBA from University of Kolkata, started her career with Manaksia Limited, and with close to 2 decades of experience in talent acquisition across various domains. Her personality is also reason for her to excel in various scopes of her career. And her association with Elixir is going back to 2003, where she started as an associate director and helping people develop sustainable work practices, has now been entrusted as the role of an executive director. And she's actually been a break in Japan for a couple of years, and something which maybe offline I would like to discuss because of my interest in that country. And then she joined IBM and had a stint for a couple of years with IBM, including her role as an agile TA leader, managing social media recruitments, and contributed to building the sourcing hub. And then she joined Elixir back in 2019. And she has added, value and leadership qualities to every organization she has been associated in the past. And with keen interest in fitness, I think fitness at a personal level also entails people to keep organizations agile and fit, not maybe from a physical perspective, but from a career perspective and a culture perspective. And she has dabbled a lot in multicultural environment. So this esteemed panel of Ravesh, Simin, Jaya Malini, and Maya, thank you very much for joining us today. And without much further ado, and to ensure that we kick off the conversation in the interest of the audiences, Ravish, let me start with you. And I'm going to put in a statistic which is not very, very Indian or very, very Asian, but it still leads us to have a conversation around the balance that organizations have in talent acquisition between internal hires and external hires. So let me verbalize the document or the statistics, which says that in the developed economies, and this was a research which was published by Deloitte a couple of years ago, they say that external hires are 60% more likely to be laid off or taken off from the jobs within 1 year itself, and 21% are more likely to leave. So from the perspective of the Indian ecosystem sustainable work practices, how does talent acquisition function ensure that there is not just parity, but equal opportunity in all aspects for internal as well as external hires, with sustainability of work being in focus? So how does this balance work in talent acquisition between internal hires and external hires? Over to you, and I would urge the other speakers to probably pitch in with your opinions. Over to you, Ravish.
Sure. Thank you, Rishi, and thank you, GI Group, and good afternoon to the panel members and the audience. So, Rishi, to answer this question, let me break it into 2 parts. The first part would be, as an organization, we would prefer mostly to have internal talent growing in the organization because it's easier, faster, you know the person. But many times organizations struggle getting a good internal talent pool to fill up the positions, and then they end up going out. So I'll talk about how an organization can build a sustainable talent pool which can fill up their requirements. And then the second part, I'll talk about it if we have to go outside and recruit. How do we not just look at the talent fit, but also the cultural fit? What can an organization do to hire not just the right skills, but the right culture fit as well? So the first part where we talk about building a talent pool, let me talk about the Syngenta experience. In 2020, we were not doing that great on our talent mobility. Just 9% of our talent could get an internal role mobility within the organization. So employees found it easier to get a job externally than to find something internally. This obviously led to a little bit of disengagement. Our engagement scores, the topmost ask from the employees was how do we increase that mobility and talent development. I think the broad two reasons why this situation arose was because leaders were holding on to the talent. They were not comfortable letting go of their talent, training, retraining new skills. And from the employees' point of view, also, they were comfortable in their space. They did not want to take risk. They were not sure if they move roles, how will it affect their career positively. So I think because of these two broad reasons, the mobility was not happening. What we did as an organization was we kind of reframed our talent management framework. We introduced new talent segments like shining star, hidden talent, stuck talent, talent to be addressed, right? Most organizations do this kind of exercise, but what we did a little differently was we did not spend a lot of time on positioning the employees into these segments, but we said, what next? So if you have a shining star, the shining star needs to be doing one of the most high priority roles for you. They should be moving into new roles every 2 years. So if someone is plotted as a shining star, there'll be a lot of leadership man hours which will go into discussion as to what next for this talent. If there's a hidden talent, what next for that? If a talent is stuck, maybe that talent is blocking the way for another 5 set of people. So what do you do with this talent? So a lot of these discussions happened at the leadership level. Also, we worked with a lot of employees on propagating career self-navigation. In a lot of our communications, we said it's not about organization finding you a role. You have to self-navigate the role and your career because you are the maximum impacted party. And we worked through their IDPs in which we discussed a lot of, so there was a lot of awareness building, capability building on these two fronts. By the year 2021, the mobility numbers had moved from 9% to 24%. And this year we are tracking around 30% talent mobility. So what it helped us is now we have a large base of talent pool. Whenever we have a requirement, we can select from them. These are willing talent who wants to take up the role. And the attrition has gone down. Our attritions are around 6 to 8% below the market. We are trying to build a T-shaped talent so that they have a depth of one skill, but breadth of multiple talents. 36% of our roles are getting filled internally. Hopefully by next couple of years, we'll be kind of tracking around 45% of internal roles filling through IJPs. So that's one bit of it, that you need to have a strong process to have a strong talent pipeline if you want the internal talent to grow. Now, in certain cases, when we have to go out and hire talent for maybe multiple reasons, strategic reasons, or we don't have that talent internally, then we introduce something called, we introduce a Harrison assessment, which is assessment which measures the talent on the fitment with the Syngenta values and fitment with the role, competencies of the role required. So this helps the interviewer or the hiring manager to probe better in the interview. So there are certain questions which are already given. If I'm low on certain competency, then a panel can probe further on those questions. So we are not just focusing on the skills, but also on the culture fit. Because in my experience, what I've seen is if you hire a lot of external talent, it ends up creating two groups in the organization: an internal group which is not able to grow, not engaged, disengaged, frustrated, and a lot of external people who are bringing in their cultures, and then there are clashes. And that's why I think that's why it leads to a lot of attrition. Like you quoted Deloitte numbers, it leads to a lot of redundancies. But if you have large talent coming in internally and few talent coming from external, which kind of gets diversity to your culture, that's the best place to be. So my 2 cents is build a strong talent pipeline, because all organizations want internal talent, but they cannot do anything if you don't have a talent pipeline. And second, if you're going external, also focus on the culture bit and use certain tools which can help you assess the culture fit as well.
Thank you, Ravish. Anybody else would like to add any inputs?
I think I'd just like to chip in there and say I think it's great to hear what Ravish has been able to achieve in terms of the real shift on having internal talent grow. One learning that I've seen in the organizations I've been with is that a lot of times there is a resistance internally from business teams to not really let go of talent. I think Ravish touched upon that as well. And a lot of times it's also about looking for the perfect candidate, right? So I would say, I would urge, if there are TA professionals and HR professionals on this call, which I presume is the audience, if you have a candidate, internal candidate who's 70 or 80% ready, be willing to take a punt on that candidate, right? Because it's always better to have internal talent grow as against, going completely out externally and, training and getting that, right culture fit. And a lot of times it could misfire. So I would say, have that little courage, build up that appetite to, take a punt on a candidate who's probably 80% there.
All right. Thank you very much, Jayamalini. And hearing at what you and
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think what Ravish said about the T model, I think that's so essential in especially large organizations where you're giving the entire depth for the person to actually grow. And that's one model. I think everybody's more focused on the I model, where people are just growing step by step, but actually having the depth and the varied aspect, I thought I could, it's amazing. And there are a lot of organizations who are currently consciously adapting to that model. So thank you, Ravish, for explaining that.
well said. So interestingly, it also, before I move to Simin for the question, so there is this whole process of internal job postings and internal job rotations. And I still have somebody very close to me struggling for the fact that she has secured the IJP, but the existing manager is not letting go. So I believe it is important to put protocols in the organizations that the purpose of IJP is to rotate. So if somebody is applying not because he or she is frustrated with the manager, but the role is too exciting, once the role has chosen the candidate internally, the managers should let go, or maybe at least have a handshake with the new manager to say, okay, instead of 1 month, why don't we have a 2-month transition and all. So I believe maybe somewhere, subtly that message should also go into the internal job transition teams, that if there is somebody who's qualified, let go, rather than that person actually being in an emotional and a moral dilemma, that am I actually going by burning bridges with my existing manager. So
Rishi, I'll just like to just add a quick bite here. So basically, when you have a proper career architecture in place, and when you have proper job rotations and the career path in place, people are able to see what next for them. And it is then an employee who will come and then talk to their boss and say, "Okay, this is going to be good for my career, and therefore I need to move on here." And that way, when this conversation happens, it is easier for the manager also to let go. So I completely agree that it is a bit of a challenge most of the times, but when this is clearly defined, then it becomes a little easier. Yeah.
sounds like a plan. Thank you very much. This conversation has been very enriching. So Simin, let me come to you. And this is a conversation about sustainable work or longevity of work, getting connected to the age of an individual. And it has started to get spoken much more. So just a couple of weeks ago, Mint has published an article. The article is titled The Untold Story of Ageism in India. And its tagline is that the workers on the wrong side of 50, and one is, I don't know what is the wrong side of 50, but it says that workers on the wrong side of 50, they face rejection and stagnation as the Indian organizations prioritize a younger and agile workforce. So my questions to you are two. One is it a foregone conclusion that the world has started to connect age and agility as being inversely proportional? And the second part of the question is that in case people believe that with age their career is slowing down, what should they really do to upskill or reskill? But this is a survival and it's an act of staying relevant rather than maybe moving up the ladder. So is really age expected to be a haunting element, and what should one do about it to keep on increasing the longevity of career in workplace? Over to you.
So you see how interesting that you asked this question to somebody who's already 50 plus, So my responses are probably going to be a little biased then. Anyways, I feel younger doesn't necessarily mean more productive. Okay, there is of course what you're saying. These studies are that we are trying to move towards a younger organization. Even in our organization, we would like to be more agile and younger. We are a 93-year-old organization, so obviously a multi-generational workforce spanning not just 3 but even 4 generations at times. So it doesn't mean that people who are older are becoming redundant or are not able to contribute. I think while the younger and more agile people may be bursting with talent, and but there could be a lot of shortfalls that you expect from this kind of from this generation, which you would probably not find in older generations. Older candidates normally bring in institutional knowledge and the experience, and they're able to be better mentors and trainers. So but what also is very, very important to understand is that we need to make sure that the older employees remain employable, remain productive, and that means it requires concerted efforts to make sure that there is no skill obsolescence, and there whatever skill gap is there, we are able to fulfill that, especially coming in today's digital technology kind of world, where everything is changing so quickly and so rapidly. So I feel one way of doing that, and something that we have established, is not just reskilling and upskilling our people, it's having a culture of continuous learning. We have established a DS Learning Academy, where this is a digital academy, and it's a AI and ML based sort of model, where the learning is hyper personalized, I would say. It is completely customized to an individual's appetite of learning, and the person can take it on his own pace, and the kind of material that they would like to, or the model on which they would like to do the learning. So that it actually makes learning more exciting. It makes it more palatable for people who may not want to read longer articles, if they just find smaller videos or bite-sized micro-learning modules. Okay, so that is one aspect of how we are doing it. And second, I feel a great way to spread knowledge in an organization is by having a two-way mentoring program. There is a lot that younger employees can teach to the older ones, and vice versa, where a mentor, in the form of an older employee, is able to give out the knowledge to the younger generation. So the two-way mentoring program actually helps, the organization both ways. We have, young employees who are just fresh out of college, and we have veterans who have even crossed 60 plus, and are still going strong in the organization. Both sets of people are able to work well together and actually come as a group which works towards the common organizational goal, only because there is this, two-way mentoring program in place. So I think that is another way of looking at, making sure that the older employees remain productive. I mean, I've had instances where one of my, HODs was really excited when he learned something new on a digital platform, and he went around telling everybody, this is something new that I've learned. We see this in our everyday life also, when we're learning a lot from our children. A lot of technology that my kids use, probably I have never seen things like that, right? So similarly, in an organization, by making sure that we have a program where we make sure that there is a constant interaction between the younger and older generation, that is how the older generation also remains productive.
Sounds viable. Anybody else? Opinions on the same part?
So if I can add, Rishi, in my experience, because the org structure is like a pyramid, and at the senior levels, then the number of positions keep getting lesser. If, as an experienced employee, I keep doing the same work, then at some point, it's not financially viable for the organization because they're paying me much more for the value I'm adding to the organization. So in such cases, it becomes then people then try ending up dropping out from that hierarchy. So it's important as an employee or as an person that I keep learning and evolving myself. Like Simon also said, I was going through a Gartner and a LinkedIn study, separate two studies, and they said go forward, there'll be two broad roles of a manager. One will be technology. Everything will be driven by technology, and I think the younger workforce will be more attuned to that because they're technology natives, right? But for the experienced people, the second part of the manager roles will be to build a culture, focus on the employee well-being, coaching the employees, the softer aspects. I think the senior experienced employees will have a very strong footing into that. But there is a pivot which is required. So if I'm a recruiter, if I'm just doing recruitment, speaking to the candidates, hiring, at some point, if I don't pivot into a different role, then my cost will be so high for the organization that I'll be the first one which will be kind of at risk for the organization. So that's one thing I wanted to add.
All right.
I'd also like to jump in
Please,
here,
yeah.
Rishi, and just address one point. I think a lot of times, and to what you referred right up front in terms of, is there an inherent bias, right? When we see that there is an older candidate, applying for a role, and is there a, do we tend to kind of shut off such candidates? I think honestly, it's a lot to do with the mindset as well, and how we help manage that as HR professionals within the organization. So a lot of times when we've been looking for mid senior roles or senior level roles as well, we have very consciously taken off any elements that could lead to bias, right? In the minds of a hiring manager, right? So we've taken off data points around, say, age, et cetera, as long as the particular candidate brings in the requisite skill sets and the experience we're looking for, right? And many times we see that our hiring managers are surprised and pleasantly surprised when they see that, later when they get to know that a particular candidate's age is actually way above what they would have normally considered, but the candidate is fantastic, and we've actually absorbed candidates like that. So I think a lot of times it's our role as well as HR professionals in terms of managing and slowly bringing that shift in mindset if there is an inherent bias, let's say.
Sounds like a plan. So, I've had just a very interesting experience a couple of weeks ago. There was an organization which approached me for some organizational development intervention. And they had particularly segmented people beyond a certain age. And they said that these individuals have started having challenges on psychological security, psychological safety of their future in the organization. And I was telling them is that the first thing maybe you're not doing right is actually telling them you're a separate lot altogether. So an intervention will happen for you separately. And there was one thing when I spoke to that group to say, what's the challenge that you're facing? They say that whenever we are asked to mentor the next generation, it appears as if it is succession planning. So sometimes when you're actually taking the wisdom from the older generation and you're wanting the newer generation to maybe learn the ropes faster, the communication sometimes matters a lot. So the moment you get into saying, hey, please start mentoring the next generation, and you do not say that the mentoring is that your department will be strengthened, a lot of people, as the article says, wrong side of 50, they tend to think that now they are trying to make us redundant, and it is more like a succession planning that is coming in. Having said that, as an academician at the age of 50, in the medical field and the education field, actually age is revered more. So people actually, when you see professors and researchers, the more the age of a researcher, the more credibility is provided. So I think the sectors also behave very, very differently when you come from, say, fintech or from other organizations for FMCG or e-commerce versus education and healthcare. I think different sector has a different handle on the opinion on age of an individual. But I don't know, maybe our gut feel is that this might become a more potential conversation continuously now on how sustainable work practices can lead to people disconnecting age from their contribution to the organization. And I'm sure it will not become a stigma on being on the wrong side of 50. So thank you very much for that very, very interesting conversation. And let me come to you, Jayamalini, and please feel free to take this more like an open-ended conversation. So I have a lot of companies who approach us even in the colleges, and they say that we have got mandates from talent acquisition teams in which we would like to run a program, which is, they technically call it as the hire, train and deploy model. So to say that the organization will come and shortlist the students first, and then they will be trained for 2-3 months on a craft by a third party, and then they will be deployed directly on the job. So that is one model which came in, which is hire first, train by a third party, and then deploy in the organization. And then the other model was organizations giving a mandate to someone to say, you train and then we will shortlist. Now the balance which I'm looking to discuss over here is in terms of internalization of this process versus externalization of the process. And are these models really, really sustainable to increase the longevity of life? So for example, should we also look at retraining people where executive education is there, which is not age specific, to take people out from the organization, get them retrained, and then bring them back in the organization? It's a very volatile, open-ended kind of a conversation, but all your views will matter a lot, Jayamalini. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Rishi. Yeah. In fact, before I go to specifically answer that, let's take a step back and see what are we trying to solve, right? What problem are we trying to solve? The thing is, I think for us as HR professionals and TA professionals, one of the biggest asks that comes to us, almost on a continual basis, is that we need talent which is trained, which needs to be made available almost as of yesterday, and needs to be productive at the earliest, if not on their day of joining, right? I'm sure everyone in the audience who's listening to me, if I could see them, they would be nodding and shaking of their heads. So and this actually becomes a particularly difficult challenge or a task to make happen very seamlessly. Especially, say, for example, if you're operating in an industry which is very niche or which is very fragmented, right? And or if you're hiring for roles wherein you don't really have a college degree or a particular finishing school wherein you can, just readily lift and shift candidates from, right? For example, the education industry that I'm a part of, for one of our biggest business lines, which is the student placement business line, wherein we look at hiring for student counselors who interact with students and their parents and help them find the right kind of course and international destination of choice. There is no finishing school where I can actually go hire from, right? And they all do very, very impactful jobs because they are actually helping fulfill the dreams of young aspiring students. Similarly, if you have to take an industry like, say, IT, right, wherein, yes, you have a number of technical colleges, but the skill sets, are so difficult to find despite having so many institutions, because, again, the way technology is changing, there are technology is just changing so rapidly that, it's becoming obsolete as you keep completing your courses, right? So in such a scenario, to get the right kind of talent, probably the hire, train, deploy approach works really well, especially when you look at entry-level openings, right? And I can talk to you, when I look at the experience that I've had in IDP. So given that we are a very niche industry, we don't have a ready talent pool. It's a very fragmented industry as well. And we, being the leaders in this space, are often the very favored poaching ground as such, right? So what we did last year is that we instituted a program called the IDP Academy, wherein we were very clear about the kind of talent that we wanted to onboard. So we looked at freshers and people up to, at the best, 2 years of experience. We looked at postgraduates, and it took us a little time to refine what is the suitable target audience for us. We brought these people on board, put them through a 2-month very rigorous internship, wherein they they get a complete download from a knowledge perspective. They get exposure to tools. They actually work on the various tools that we use, our full-time employees use. They are mentored, they are coached, they undergo a whole assessment process, and only if they clear that assessment process, then they get absorbed as full-time counselors, right? And we found that this works really well. The advantages of having something like this is that, one, the moment that internship is over, here is a ready-made trained resource, directly absorbable for the business, right? Pretty much productive within a 2-month period. And of course, it takes a little time to, completely integrate, but they're productive a lot faster as compared to me hiring completely from outside and then, having this person getting trained in and getting adapted to the culture of the company. The second advantage is that because they are typically, fresher level employees or employees with just, candidates with just about 2 years of experience, they're pretty much molded into the IDP way of working, right? So you can, as long as our selection process are good, as long as our entire training process is really robust, we have seen that we've seen a very successful conversion of these IDP Academy interns into our full-time roles. So there's a huge advantage when you look at, investing that kind of time. So that's probably the only thing that I would say companies need to keep in mind is that, yes, when you're spending 2 months on, like, say, a bunch of candidates, it is going to take a lot of bandwidth from the business, because they are going to be training, these new candidates. That means work hours away from their core jobs. But as long as they are able to see that advantage and benefit of having, of investing that time and seeing that outcome at the end of just a mere 2 months, I think there's a huge acceptability. You will always see that there are some parts of the business or some geographies wherein, and some leaders who are early adapters and some are a few laggards. So for those of you who would like to experiment with a similar model, probably it'll be a good idea to start with a pilot because you know your people well. So start with those whom you think would be early adopters, and it actually could work very well. But Rishi, this will of course to a large extent work when you look at the more entry level kind of jobs. When you're looking at roles which are, say, with a few years of experience, the other route is, of course, which Ravish has already spoken about in terms of how do you look at internal candidates, right? It's literally hiring people who are already trained, maybe into a different geography or into a different business line. But another way we could actually look at, and I think we do see more and more companies going that route, is to look at candidates who say have taken a break from their careers, right? Depending on whatever life stage need they have. We see a lot of it specifically for women who may have taken a break, right? Exceptionally talented women who've had to take that break, or even post-COVID. In fact, we're even seeing a lot of men candidates who've had to take a break and wanted to do their own thing. Many of them started their own entrepreneurship practices and then want to come back to the industry, right? So allowing such candidates to boomerang back into the corporate sector, I think would work wonders for organizations which have, the appetite for taking a risk like that. And I think it also would work really well, provided you are getting that right cultural fit and you're checking for that and you're assessing that adequately before you onboard such candidates. But I think that's another good way that, again, it's worked well for us in a few positions that we've tried it, getting people who've been on a break or who've done their own thing off the corporate space and then come back to join us.
Sounds like a plan, Jay Malini. Thank you for that. Any other panelists having any thoughts in mind?
So yeah, I agree with Jay Malini that this could be a great model for hiring at the entry level. When it comes to a little more senior positions, this may not really be the perfect way. Also, one of the pitfalls in this entire thing is that when you do have, I mean, when you're doing it internally, then it's all right because you are actually doing the selection and then looking at the cultural fit and then doing it. But there are a lot of organizations that outsource this activity. they'll come to an institute and say, okay, you do the training and then we will hire. In that case, I think what becomes a little challenging is to ensure that the right person is actually hired in, and what is the attitude of the person that you're getting in, whether it's that person is going to be successful or not. In DS, we have a program called the DS ACE program, where we do hire people with some lateral experience from the top institutes of the country, and we take them through a similar experience like Jaimalini said, except for us it is more like a 6-month internship, and we take them through the entire facets of all the businesses and all the departments, so that they become all-rounded, sort of individuals, and then are able to be deployed in strategy in various roles in various businesses. So yeah, I mean, somewhere it can work, but not in all.
And I also wanted to add, Rishi, she touched on a very important topic, while she was talking, was you hire the person may not be 100% fit. The person may be a 70, 75, 80% fit, right? The need that most hiring managers have, that you have to get a person who's perfect. A square, there has to be a square that fits that perfect square. So I think, I can see everybody smiling, and I'm sure a lot of people agree that it is the role of the hiring team and the HR professionals to go back, educate, counsel, explain, because it is impossible to get the perfect fit. How much ever we train, we teach, we put them in institutes, ultimately we're human beings, right? Nobody's perfect, and it is impossible to replicate the exact person who has quit or moved on, like we were talking about IJPs. So I think that's a very important point, and hopefully if the world evolves better, I think we will have the ability to risk and take on more people who have the skills and attitude, rather than just searching for the perfect fit. So I just thought I'll just add that.
Thank you for that. So I'll just add 2 cents to some words which I've learned very recently. One of that is boomeranging. So I never knew that it was a professional word in the HR talent acquisition case, and I stumbled on it while I was teaching the subject of organization development, and boomeranging came out. So I know organizations who don't let their former employees boomerang. So they say that once you have left the organization, you will not be able to join back, and the jury is still out and the world is divided whether it's a right practice or not. But maybe that also is an impediment one should cross, to be very liberal and open-minded, to say that if we were not able to retain the person because of location, money, profile, brand, whatever, there's no harm in again re-interviewing the person at an equal opportunity level in case the person is coming back. So one, I don't know what's the right or wrong answer at a policy level that companies have to say once you're out for that matter. And the other topic which I think I'll now also ask Maya to add to that question is their program called Returnship. And it's a very unique program. I've heard about it earlier as well, and it resonates with what Jaya Malini mentioned, that people come out of sabbaticals, and sabbaticals have become gender neutral now. It is not about just the females, and as you mentioned, there are enough men who are returning from sabbaticals. In fact, there are people who came out of sabbaticals after overcoming mental stress. So some people had lost their near and dear ones, came out from PTSD, and they are reintegrating back into the regime. But let's look at this, that when shortlistings happen in an organization, and Maya, this is predominantly a conversation directed towards you, how does one really ensure that there is no bias with respect to returnships or lesser represented groups? That's one part of the question. And there's something else in the air which is mentioned as application tracking systems. So a lot of people know about them, to say that if you have 500 applications, there's a machine learning algorithm which will do keyword search and bring out the candidates. And people also believe that those systems are also not foolproof.
Yeah.
So in terms of ensuring technology works to the benefit of the organization, and people returning to their jobs are people who are from lesser represented groups, there is no bias when talent acquisition is happening. How do you really make a real attempt to put this in place? Over to you, Maya.
Sure. So, Rishi, I'll just start with what unconscious bias is, right? Most of the time, we're just unfortunately stereotyping people, and we are forming an opinion and not realizing it. Most of the time, it's so natural because our brain is wired in such a way that we are instinctively categorizing these people and making these assumptions. You were talking about returning women. I mean, immediately, though the world is, evolving and we are seeing a lot of change, but we do it without thinking, and we feel that this person, coming back after, whatever, it could be an education break, it could be a maternity break, it could be a sabbatical because that person just wanted a year break. But the unconscious bias, and it's mixed with a genuine concern that, okay, how is this person going to manage after a break? So a lot of times the stress to close positions or the pressure to ensure that for talent acquisition we need to step into something very soon, I think creates that bias to close something and try to find out people who are more like me, or okay, maybe the experience may not be the same, and let's try and interview better. So cutting that out and having a more, like you said, inclusive approach, right? Interviewing the person for the skills and not for the personality that the person is wanting that you want on the table. So a lot of times I have seen talent acquisition leaders or the hiring managers saying, oh, the person is just like me and I would want a similar person, not this person. So we are moving away from what actually the JD is, unconsciously, right? What the JD calls for the job, and not bringing in actually what is required in terms of skills. So I'll give you a very personal example. I think you were talking about boomeranging, and I'm somebody, who you can categorize as a returning woman. So I did, like I came back from Japan, I was not working there. So when I came back, I was looking out. So there were people who wanted to actually interview, and the interview discussion was purely based on skills and my past experience and how I could create an impact for the particular job that I was interviewing for. But there were also these personal questions that didn't make any meaning, because ultimately if a lady is coming for an interview or a guy is coming for an interview, there are 1,000 battles that the person has already fought with himself or herself in the mind, prepared the resume, which is another, I think it takes a lot of strength to do that, and then accept and apply for a job and then come. So there are so many steps that the person has already taken forward that they don't need to come and explain in the interview on how their child is going to be taken care of, or how their in-laws, if they're senior citizens, need to be taken care of. So I think this unconscious bias, unfortunately, is because people, we're all into talent acquisition. We all know that we should not do it, and we should consciously, but it comes so naturally. I have a friend who's done a PhD where she submitted a paper where she said we form an opinion in 3 seconds. In 3 seconds. So it comes so naturally in our interviews also, right? In the beginning of the interview, we're liking the person and we will drift questions towards taking the person on, and at the end of the interview we've not really assessed that person because we're so talking about so many other topics than actually assessing. So I think the primary reason is we need to ensure that we know what we want, right? We keep our bias out, and we have assessment sheets written. So when we write the assessment sheet after an interview, we know what we want and whether there's a gap as to the person, what he brings to the table. So I think that, keeping that aside, we have done a lot of returnship programs in terms of hiring for our clients where they specifically wanted men. They said, okay, we've done a lot of programs for women. We want men or diversity in the true form, whether LGBT, whether, physically challenged, special folks. So the world right now wants more diverse, because ultimately an organization is able to grow when the population is not the like me in the bias, but actually it is more diverse, and we're actually including a lot of other people also in the organization. So I just hope that this explains that we should keep bias completely out and actually assess on skills.
Like a very, very valid thought. Any other opinions from the panel?
So Rishi, if I can add a couple of thoughts to what Maya said on unconscious bias. So there's a concept of paradigm. So paradigm is nothing but based on our experiences, what we have learned, upbringing, and all of that. We have created a framework, a boundary in our mind. The good thing about the paradigm is it helps us take decisions. So if I'm interviewing, it helps me take the decision on the right candidate. But the problem with paradigm is anything outside of that paradigm, I'm not able to link to it, connect, understand it, right? So the concept of unconscious bias sometimes doesn't work because it's unconscious. I don't know in the interview. So a new term which has come up is consciously aware. So if I'm in an interview and I'm not liking the candidate, can I consciously question myself? Is it because the way the person is communicating? Is it because of the age? Because of whatever it is? So if I'm consciously trying to be aware, then that may help us overcome the unconscious bias part of it. The second thing I wanted to talk about of the technology use, you mentioned that technology itself could be biased, and there was a lot of research which came up that the people who were actually coding for machine learning and other technologies, their biases were coming into the programming itself. There was a US government which was using technology to identify maybe culprits and things like that, and it was ending up catching up women or black people because the coders bias were coming into the codes itself. So as a user of technology, if I'm a technology TA team, and if it says that these CVs are top 20 CVs, they have limited connect suitability for you, rather than rejecting it as a bulk, as a recruiter, I should go through them. Maybe I spend lesser time. I don't spend the good 4-5 minutes on them, but I have to browse through them before I reject them. And I cannot just depend on the technology, because if the person has not written the CV in the way we want, or there's an inbuilt biases in the technology, that should not come out. So yeah, those were the 2 points.
Sounds like a plan. So let me just share 1 minute of my experience to this. So there is a divided opinion in a lot of people to say that when somebody takes a sabbatical, does somebody give credit to that period as an experience or not? So I have seen candidates defending the sabbatical to say, hey, in that sabbatical, the amount of organization skills that I had to pursue are much more than what I could have done in an organization, or probably my control on my mental health is probably 10x more. But then on the other side, when I hear recruiters, they generally have a fundamental belief that a returning employee should not command the same salary as benchmarked in the industry. So I don't know whether it's an individual mindset or we genuinely believe that sabbatical is equal to no experience. I still, as I mentioned, I'm in between conversations, but when I do my own research, my PhD is ongoing in organizational leadership, I get these kind of opinions that, oh yes, we will evaluate a person unbiased, but that person has to start at a level which is below than the salary band, because there are years of experience which are not counted in the person's work life. So when you look at longevity of careers, maybe there has to be a time when we also don't get biased in terms of saying that those sabbatical years were a waste professionally. Maybe somebody was actually upskilling and reskilling themselves very, very regularly. So that is something which maybe we will take some time to give credit to people who are returning. And Ravish, to your point, hearing it, it's very scary that as a coder, I can actually put my biases into an application tracking system, which might even be hunting people of a particular age, ethnicity, and moving them out. And I think it is for the reason the IT teams and technical teams in companies are also associating with the HR department to ensure that technology biases do not throw out people who are deserving. But you've actually got me scared. And last but not the least, I've seen teaching in colleges for the last 10 years. We still are probably not teaching technology to HR professionals. And it's not about coding. It is just about knowing how technology can add or eliminate bias. I think it is high time when you meet colleges, all of you, please also tell them that technology is equally important to talent acquisition as much as it is important to, say, a project management or a product management. So let me come to the last question. And in this question, we'll need 1 minute of each of your time, but I'll start with Maya. This all probably got again escalated during the COVID era, but now people who want to work want a lot of flexibility in the work, not just the hours, but the location of work. And it seems that it has become a top priority for a lot of employees for continuous employment to say, give me either my place of work or flexible hours. And how far can organizations accommodate this? Because there are sectors which cannot work remote, and offsite work is not an option. So when an organization has to draw a line in terms of flexibility to be extended to employees to work in remote situations or work in flexible situations, how much should one really, extend the olive branch? So I'll start with Maya, but then please give, your closing inputs to this question, all of you. Yes, Maya.
Sure, sure. I think the most important part of asking for flexibility is the role that you are in, because not all roles can be flexible, right? Somebody working in the plant, in the manufacturing unit, you can't sit at home and expect things to get done. So it all depends on the kind of role that you've taken, the kind of career that you've chosen, and if that allows you. Right now, the good thing is the organizations are saying that a lot of roles can be done from home if you give flexibility. If the person has to travel for too long and just needs to come to office for a day or two, the remaining days, the person can either work for a little more time, or the person is having the mental strength and the stability to actually be more productive at work. So at GI, I'll give you an example that it depends on the role. If the person needs to come where, the office environment is very important, then we would have the people come to office. But there are certain roles that it's okay to work from home for maybe extended periods, and you just come to office, sometimes. But the ideal approach is to have a hybrid agile, manner, where you work for 2-3 days in office and 2-3 days, away from home. So you have the perfect blend where you have the rest that you need, as well as you come and, it's an energy after all when you come to office, you meet people. But outside GI, I have been, because I'm in this industry where I'm interacting with a lot of people from across domains and verticals. So it's purely depending on the role, and if the person needs to come to office, then they have to come to office and work from office. So
Rishi, I'd like to add here. So, whenever we talk of flexibility, we're always assuming it is, either working from home kind of a thing or remote working. But flexibility does not necessarily mean that. Flexibility actually is the autonomy and the control that you're giving to your people. So, when you talk about manufacturing organizations like ours, where certain roles cannot be done sitting at home, you do allow flexibility in terms of having autonomy in how you want to get your work done, in what time frame, in also having a say in what shifts you can come in having certain flexibilities in taking times off when you want to. So those are kind of flexibilities I think that the organizations are now extending to employees. It's not just a work from home kind of an environment any longer.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think I completely echo what Maya and Simin have mentioned. This is a bit of a tough one to crack, and there can't be a uniform guideline across, employees and across roles. It is as to how can you customize, but I think the biggest element is that the moment you look at flexibility, it's about, again, the shift in mindset of looking at the work that you need to get done. It is in terms of, having trust on your employees, not so much in terms of being able to see them, in front of your face all the time, and thereby say that, XYZ is working or not. So I think it's role-based. As long as you're able to get your work done and you are there for the customers or the stakeholders whom you need to interact with. So it's not only you operating in isolation, but also the stakeholders whom you need to deal with on a regular basis to be effective in your role and for them to be effective in their role. As long as that is possible to accommodate in terms of maybe, flexible work timings or the workplace, or like, the aspects that Simin spoke about, giving them that say. As long as employees have that say and that feeling that they also do have control, or they have an opinion that is being listened to by the organization, I think that goes a long way in ensuring that people feel engaged and feel that they have that work-life balance and that work-life integration. I think more than balance in this day and time.
Sounds like a plan. Ravish?
Yeah, my closing comments, Rishi. So one is a contrarian view that earlier the power of the was with the organization. Now it has moved to the employees. I think there's a study which says by 2025, 25% of the working population will be Gen Z, which is, and these people are in Maslow's hierarchy. Their basic needs are met. So they are looking at something like recognition, culture, well-being, and things. So they will be calling the shots. They're not going to be driven. Few years back, no one would have thought that companies will find difficult getting people back to the office. Talking about moonlighting, it has suddenly become a debate, and people are arguing both sides, right? Maybe 3 years back, this was a non-issue. So a lot of power is shifting to the employees because they are Gen Zs. Second is because of technology, a lot of operational roles will get in a way redundant. A lot of roles which will be left will be very niche, skill based. So the employees will be the differentiator between the organization. Getting funding, getting technology, all of that will be easy. Getting the right people, getting the right culture will be the differentiator. So the employees will be calling the shots, and we will have to, as an HR, as a hiring manager, as a recruiter, we will have to now shift our mindset also, that we cannot be operating in the earlier days. Now maybe the tables have turned.
It's amazing what all of you have spoken about it. In fact, the way people are cursing moonlighting maybe just increases more interest in that concept. So I have realized in marketing that if leaders start to talk more about something, it does not become a deterrent. Actually, others want to try it. That why is somebody talking about it so much? So hearing everybody right from Wipros to IBMs of the world talking about it, I think the decibel level should stop. But such an invigorating conversation with all of you, where we started discussing about the balance between internal and external hires, went into ageism and how the other side of 50s needs to be looked at, longevity of their careers, speaking about various models, hire, train, deploy models, and how can the pros and cons work in terms of that aspect, looking at returnships and having a very unbiased opinion to life when people are boomeranging or people are coming out from sabbaticals, and eventually the role flexible working, and what I hear more is to say working with autonomy and authority can play in extending the life or career of an individual. I think it has been such an amazing hour that has been well spent in the benefit of the audience, and I really, really thank all of you on behalf of GI Group as well to give your valuable time on a day and in the afternoon when I'm sure there are more pressing matters on your table as well. And in due course of time, I'll take the honor to catch up with you if possible in the cities we are in. But thank you very much for joining us today, and please help in a way to keep adding value to people who are looking at various facets and workings of workforce. So with that, I'll, in the interest of time, close this panel today and wish you all a wonderful afternoon ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.